And what we have planned for you today is a wonderful panel. We thought we would use this panel as an opportunity to showcase some of our really wonderful and illustrious African alumni from MSU. We were fortunate to participate in Alumni University 2 years ago when we had Global Africa here at MSU. But what's so cool about this Alumni University panel is it's virtual, and that means that we've got alumni coming in today from South Africa, from Kenya, and we're also featuring 2 other alumni. One is a current graduate student, and one is a very recent alum who's working here in the United States at the moment. I'm going to be introducing all of the panelists, and before we get started, I would just like to let you all know that because large parts of Africa are French-speaking rather than English-speaking, we will always want to be inclusive of different groups and different languages. So we're broadcasting today in both English and French. So if French is your language, please go to the bottom of the screen and you can click on the translation or interpretation link, and you can select either English or French as your language. And this is one of the innovations that we've been able to do in the virtual space, is to have more participation from our colleagues and alumni and friends all over the African continent, regardless of their language. So let me start sharing the screen then, and I'll introduce our panelists, and then I'll ask them to each speak for about 10 minutes. We've asked each panelist to talk about what they experienced at MSU when they were students, and what their lives have been like now that they're alums, or how perhaps Angela imagines her life, and the impact that their MSU education has had on their life and on their own home countries. Let me just go now to my PowerPoint so I can present this to you. Great, so we'll be starting with one of our very illustrious alumni, Somadoda Fikeni. Somadoda is a policy analyst and a consultant in South Africa. He did a BA honors at University of Transkei in South Africa, an MA at Queen's University in Canada, and then he did a PhD here at MSU, graduating in 2002 in comparative politics and public policy analysis. And he's going to tell us a lot more about his life, but he's been a major contributor in South Africa as a policy consultant, as a higher education leader, as an advisor, and also as a social activist, which is part of our important heritage at MSU as well. He's an author and researcher, received multiple awards, and he's very deeply engaged in the community and community engagement. Our next speaker will be David Onyonka. He's an entrepreneur from Kenya, a real estate developer, and a very proud alumnus. So David joined MSU in the fall of 1997. He got a bachelor's degree in electrical and computer engineering from the MSU College of Engineering in 2002. He worked for 5 years for Daimler Chrysler Corporation right here in Michigan, and then he went back to Kenya and began pursuing his own private business. His business that he started, his real estate company, was called Spartan Developers. So we're so proud that the Spartan identity is kept alive by these wonderful alumni in Kenya. And now it's called the Spartan Group Realty. And what's really exciting about David's career that I hope he'll share with us is he's moving now more intentionally into social entrepreneurship, into the affordable housing sector. So a really exciting area for giving back to his own country. The next speaker is a very recent grad. We're so proud of Panashe Manangamutswe, who graduated just last year in 2019, also like David, with a degree in engineering and computer science. She's now the function owner and algorithm systems engineer. I hope you'll tell us more about that, Panashe, at Aptiv, which is a global technology company. They work on vehicles and mobility on safe, green, and connected options for transportation. But one of the important areas that Panashe is active in is helping other young women, especially women from disadvantaged backgrounds, to join STEM fields. You know, women are really a minority in terms of representation in the field of engineering. So she was actually an ambassador for the MSU College of Engineering for Women in Engineering, and she is working as a recruiter for her company today, trying to activate more opportunities for young women all the way from high school to be interested in these kinds of careers. So we're really proud to have you with us today, Panashe. And then lastly, but not least, is a current PhD student, Angela Manjichi. She's a doctoral candidate in community sustainability. She specializes in gender, justice, and environmental change. Before coming to MSU, she was at the Higher Polytechnic University in Manica in Mozambique, and she's been a lecturer there in agriculture. And she's done a lot of other things in academic areas and in research. And she's very interested in sustainable development, agriculture, gender, and social justice. So we've got some wonderful people here today. I hope you'll enjoy hearing from them. Without going on to tell you about them myself, I will let them tell you in person about their MSU careers and their lives. And we'll start with Somadoda Fikeni.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for such a wonderful introduction, and also greetings to my colleagues. I just want to start with where I would have ended to make sure that it doesn't get locked outside when my 10 minutes is over. I'll start in a strange manner, not by saying when I came to MSU, but rather say, we are currently having a new world order and a new global system that is likely to emerge after the COVID-19 pandemic. We were already seeing global trends in that direction. And it becomes very important, therefore, to forge partnerships to to shape the future in the service of humanity. I was, as I was preparing for this presentation, thinking how history, especially the African history of anti-colonialism, was shaped by such people coming to universities and then Pan-Africanism, which impacted on the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, interacting with the likes of W.E.B. Du Bois, and the rest is history. And I was also thinking of how the likes of Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, also met some of their colleagues. They came up with great ideas and they shaped the world through their innovations. So the issue of partnerships, the issue of networks is quite key at the moment when the world is actually quickly changing in what we call in social sciences the VUCA moment, the volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex. And as such, I do think that as we face all these mega trends, whether it's climate change, environmental degradation, or fourth IR, we ought to be talking about how we forge links for greater impact. But now let me quickly come to the time when I came to Spartan Village and MSU in 1996, August. I came to do PhD in political science program there. I quickly realized that we didn't have many students from the African continent who were in that particular field because many were in agroeconomics, in education, with some few in engineering. And the reason I decided to come to the US when there was an offer for other scholarships in the UK, I was always fascinated by the fact that this was the most influential country which was setting the trends across the world. but also when I was told that it had a strong African Studies program, I was very much interested because having been in some degree of isolation within South Africa during the years of apartheid, one needed to have a greater exposure. And the irony is that I had to come to America and Michigan State University to meet the widest range of fellow Africans. And I've since kept contact with many of those. And when I came to MSU, I was also fascinated by the grand scale of the institution itself. It had its own banks, it had hotels and so forth and so on. Of course, as for the cold and the winter, I was prepared by my earlier studies in Canada, in McMaster University, as well as Queen's University. So that one was not too much of a culture shock. It didn't take long when I came to MSU because I wanted to see how their graduations were conducted during the fall of 1996. I went to Breslin Center and I was quite dazzled by so many global flags representing the countries of the world. As I was looking for the flag of my country, to my horror, I realized that we still had the apartheid flag and it had not changed. So I raised an issue with this. I wrote an article, there were protests, and the flag was brought down. So the activist in me, I had always been a political activist and an activist for social justice, and therefore the activist in me had kicked in. And I also became the president of the African Student Union. I was elected in 1997. And during that time, it was one of the most consequential, according to some of those who viewed the period, because I tried to mobilize students. Some of them were organized according to countries, according to regions, and some the Maghreb region and so forth. But I persuaded them that you could still have your country organizations, but we have something bigger, and we could share from that experience. And that is exactly what happened. And beyond that, we forged some links with the Black Graduate Student Association, with the Caribbean Student Association. And it was for that reason that we were able to deal with what we perceived to be marginalization of African students and some of the events we were organizing. During that same period, we brought in great scholars like Ali Mazrui, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. We raised funds like no other time before. And we were able to bring in some live cultural events, and life was quite vibrant. Even when some of our students lost their parents or loved ones or relatives, we were able to raise funds to at least contribute to the ticket for them to go home and come back. And we were able to give each other support. And that in itself, I think, was one of the most important experiences that we had. There are some anecdotes that I can come up with which really shine so bright in my experience at MSU. One of those, I had a roommate or a person I shared a flat with from Mozambique. And when the winter came, they distributed some salt into each one of the households so that we can sprinkle it on the walkway. And as it was predicted that we were going to have a winter blizzard coming, I started putting some salt and he had a smile, rather amused. And later on, I was asking, why were you smiling when I was putting some salt? He said, no, it's because I come from a village where we normally use salt to chase away bad spirits. And I'm happy that you have kept your tradition. So I laughed and said, no, here it is for something else. So that was one anecdote. The other one, I forged relations with the farmers. So I would go to the farm, slaughter sheep, goats and so forth for many African students who wanted to have some ceremonies. And I also had a mini driving school, so I was helping especially those students who were driving on the other side of the road to acquire their licenses. There were moments such as the American football and the tailgating festivals, which was quite new and quite grand on scale. And also the issue of the agricultural exhibitions was one of the things I would look up to every year because it was one of those experiences. And I just want to also mention that I followed American politics. I went to look for African Americans, look for Native Americans up to places like Mount Pleasant and so forth for exposure. There were stressful moments. There were suicides. I remember there was a Kenyan student committed suicide. There was an Indian student who committed suicide. But I'll just skip many other things and say, since returning to South Africa, I have had a number of things that I've done. Amongst those, I've hosted students from MSU led by John Mesler, and I've since come to MSU several times. And in the presentation, I've shared pictures when I visited MSU. And the current roles, I wouldn't know where to begin because I've even established a scenario, South Africa Scenarios 2030. I've been involved in the AU. I've been involved as a think tank in the BRICS. And currently, there are some of my passions. I've just started farming. I am now being trained as a drone pilot. And there are many other exciting things which are coming up as I'm also embarking on the business, world. And I've been quite lucky that MSU gave me the opportunity and the confidence and the skills. And that is why I've come this far. And I do think that if we look at partnerships that we can forge, if we can look at what each one is doing and have a database for that, will go a long way. I close with this quotation from Frantz Fanon. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. If not now, when can we do it? If not you, who will do it? If not here, where will it be done? So out of this exercise, I hope we can forge impactful partnerships and networks, shaping the futures in the service of humanity, particularly the African continent, which is the next frontier of development and which has demographic dividends, youthful, with many resources at hand. I think I'll stop there and expand on some of the things when we engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Soma. Your stories and your activities are so rich. We could listen for a long time. I hope we'll have many opportunities to engage, not just here, but in the future. Next, we'll go to David Onyonka, who's joining us today all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Jamie. Fellow alumni, fellow students, if there are any in here, and my fellow colleagues. I'm really happy and honored to share my story with you and my experiences about my university education at Michigan State University. It's unbelievable how time has flown. I joined MSU back in 1997 as a green student, basically barely out of high school. I had a dream to become part of the tech industry. And in those days, the internet had just started hitting its stride. And so when I looked up my options on where to go to school, MSU's engineering school came up really strongly because I wanted to do something that had computers, which was computer engineering, and electrical engineering together. And the College of Engineering at the time was one of the few schools that was offering that program. So I blindly, because again, I had no clue where Michigan was. I'm out of Nairobi, Kenya, which is a country on the equator. We basically have, almost the same kind of weather all year round. And, I got accepted to Michigan State, made my plans, jumped on a plane, and I showed up in East Lansing via Detroit in the summer of 1997. And it's profound that, it's maybe almost 20 plus years later that I'm reconnecting with people that I met that long time ago. So Soma, who's just spoken, was a very active person. At the time I was in Michigan State. And again, it's profound that this situation, as bad as it is, the COVID, has managed to bring us together in a different manner. So anyway, back to my story. So I showed up at Michigan State. I had my ideas about what the US was, basically probably what I saw on TV, but nothing could really prepare me for what I experienced. There were highs, there were lows, but I would say I really, really loved my college experience. Michigan State was a huge campus, probably one of the largest campuses in the US. And the college experience I was looking for was exactly that. And it fulfilled my expectations, because from a exposure standpoint, I met people from all over the world. I met my fellow African students. I met students out of Asia. I met my fellow US citizens and American citizens who taught me a lot. I actually worked in the admissions office, so I got in contact with a lot of new students along the way. But needless to say, I think the culture shock about even how classes were run. The Kenyan system is tied to the UK English system, which is kind of stringent. So, you woe to me when I walked in on campus and nobody really told you how and when and why you had to go to class, and all those things were things that helped shape my future, I'd say, habits, and I hope for the positive. And then transitioning also from a person basically out of the teens, barely out of the teens, into an adult. So I actually got socialized in the US and in Michigan State. By the time I left, I had spent close to 5 years because I did take an internship during my school year to do an educational internship at Daimler Chrysler that I ended up working with. And then my experiences in Breslin Center, I picked up American football. The football I knew was soccer. That was amazing. I then became an American football fanatic. I still am to this day. I wake up in the middle of the night trying to keep up with some of the games. Live and die with the Spartans. And then I also remember, again, the good friends I made a lot of people that met a lot of friends and people that I probably would have never met if I hadn't come out there. People from different African countries, Uganda, Nigeria, Tanzania. I mean, I think Michigan State, the one thing I'll give it credit for is we had a diverse community on campus, and that was fantastic. The winters were brutal. I remember my first winter, it was snowing. I'd never seen snow. everyone ran into the building, I was staying at McDonald Hall at the time. I ran outside and basically tried to grab a piece of the snow. I'd never seen it before. So, I mean, it was very, very profound in terms of the things that I experienced. Greater than that, I learned a sense of community. I mean, I learned the power of responsibility, partnerships, as Soma has mentioned, the social interactions that you make with people from different walks of life. My roommate was in the US Army before he came to college, so he had a lot of stories. But all of that taught me a lot. I then jumped into the working community, the working class. In Daimler Chrysler, I was working in plant systems. We used to install plants in systems in the car plants around the US, Canada. So I traveled quite a bit, but also I met a lot of alumni along the way. There's a lovely sense of community with the MSU alumni, and subsequently to that, as Jamie mentioned, I made my way back to Kenya after 5 years, because I'd been in the US for almost 10 years, and I was determined to craft my own way. And so I set up shop in the real estate industry, which everyone kind of scratches their head, because I was, as I said, I was determined to become part of the tech world. But there was a passion for construction that I always had. And so I decided to chase it while I still had the energy and the vigor to do it. And so I started a company with, as I said, strangely enough, an MSU alumnus that was at MSU at the same time I was. We called our company Spartan Developers. And we set off from scratch, building this company. And I mean, there's not enough time to tell the whole story, but everyone that hears the story sort of admires the resolve we had. We were quite young at the time, and it's grown to be a decently sized company. But a lot of the work ethic, a lot of the partnerships, a lot of the attitude that we developed was stuff that we learned from this school. And so I can't thank my experience or what I learned at MSU enough, because it did teach us that anything is possible. I met fascinating people there, and we're hoping to craft our way and develop a new thinking and generation of African citizens that can show a new side of Africa. So part of what we're doing is getting into social housing, but that allows our citizens to be able to afford houses and since for a long time it's not been something that has been as straightforward as it is in other countries. So we're jumping into social entrepreneurship as a way to inspire people to own homes for the first time and to give back to the citizens of our country, and maybe trailblaze and set an example as to what we can be if we put our minds to it. So, I look forward to hearing from the rest of you, and thank you for giving me this time. It's really been a fascinating journey that we went through starting in the 90s, and now we're in 2020. But again, I'm really thankful the experience that I had at Michigan State. It changed me as a person. I don't think I would have been the same person had I gone somewhere else. And look forward to sharing my experience and hopefully helping others chart their path and maybe do better and greater things than we've done. So again, I thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be around to answer them. And thank you for your time again.
Thank you so much, David, for such an inspiring story. And if anybody hasn't yet picked up on this theme of the contribution that our alumni are making to the future of their own countries, and really the world. It's very inspiring. Thanks so much, David. Just want to remind everyone, we will have a Q&A after all the panelists have presented. So if you have some cute questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put your questions in there either now or as we move into the Q&A section. So now I'm really delighted to introduce Panashe Manangamutswe, who's our next speaker. Welcome, Panashe.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Good morning, everyone, and mostly probably good afternoon to everybody else. I will probably just go through share presentation, and then we could probably have a conversation. I am really honored to be part of this conversation. I remember I was featured with Alumni University about 2 years ago. Have been working with the African Studies Center, so it is very nice that we have all stories being shared, and I see that that's continued to be done, and I think that's been what MSU has been about. So I think the first time I saw the theme, that was very interesting because for me, it felt like it does resonate with my journey at Michigan State and to where I am right now. I think Jamie did a really good job talking about what I did. So Panashe, and I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. My native language is Shona, but I graduated from Michigan State in 2019. It's pretty recent, but feels like a long time ago because I think for now, we were the last class to actually have an in-person graduation ceremony, and we actually did walk across the stage. So that was exciting. And I think whilst at MSU, even though it was a very big campus, I think a big campus gives you opportunity and exposure. But then the most important thing was, for me, I was actively involved in different things. So that basically gave me that close-knit community inside the big school. So I always told people that yes, MSU is big, but I do have a small community inside the big community. So that was pretty exciting. I was a Mastercard Foundation Fellow, and as what Jamie also talked about, I was actively involved in women in engineering. I think this also stemmed from my journey being, if you're women in tech, what does that look like? And I really wanted to be involved and be able to inspire other younger girls that yes, it was possible for you to pursue such a career. As part of the MSU Honors College, I think at MSU, I really loved research. I worked with a lot of different professors, and really those experiences were invaluable. I think I remember my first summer at Michigan State, I actually got a chance to go to Rwanda, where we're doing a 2-week boot camp, tech boot camp for girls in Rwanda. I think that was, and that's when I realized that MSU was the place for me to pursue my dreams and exactly resonated with everything that I really wanted to do. So just because I love talking about Zimbabwe, I did put a picture of Zimbabwe. So if you don't remember anything from this presentation, you let's remember that Zimbabwe should be your next destination for the summer. So I think I decided to just put that presentation into, I'm going to talk about my past, talk about my present, what I'm currently doing, and basically talk about the future as well, alluding to the theme of this webinar today. So currently, I am a function owner, algorithm systems engineer. It sounds like a mouthful, but basically I think more and more we hear about self-driving cars, and we hear about active safety inside vehicles. So do we, if in the, maybe there's an accident about to happen, how can our cars protect ourselves or actively warn us before something bad really happens? I think I've read a lot about millions of accidents that are due to human error. And I think we are taking a stride within the tech community to actually decrease that. So my job primarily is designing and validating those active safety features, be it pedestrian detection, emergency braking. So those are some of the stuff that I am currently working on. I think the most important thing for me that was basically always goes back to my MSU education is within a year of actually working with the company, I had been named to take care or to lead a team of 5. And I think the main thing that I heard from everyone I was working with is, we know you're from Michigan State just by the way you work. Your work ethic is amazing. And I've heard that a lot of times. And a lot of people always talk about how MSU prepares you for industry. And that is exactly what I got when I did attend MSU. So I think I've always been that person where I'm still interested to remain engaged with the community. So even though I am now a working professional, I still remain being an active campaign recruiter. I've been going to schools around the world or schools around the United States, talking to girls about how important or the role that we could potentially play in the tech industry. So I continue to be part of alumni engagement. I think there's a United States Achievers Program based out of Zimbabwe. I still work with the Mastercard Foundation's program, and definitely the Michigan State and Alumni University, as well as the African Studies Center. So I think that's some of the things that I'm currently doing. And it always goes back to that my past or my experience at Michigan State has really shaped my present. And that is something that I'm continuously excited about. And I think one thing that was very exciting to talk about today was, what then is the future? We've gotten this great education from Michigan State, and then currently those experiences greatly shaped who you are. So what exactly do I envision the future to be? I think I've always talked to people, and people have always heard this from me, that STEM outreach is near and dear to my heart. I think I would remember talking about how currently sub-Saharan Africa actually requires 2.5 million more engineers. That is a lot of people that could potentially address the continent's gravest development problems. And for me, I truly believe that if we're able to inspire younger students, start from high school, that this is something that we could actually take on. I think very soon we'd have Africa being a tech hub. And that's something that I continually do through the other alumni engagement opportunities that I do have. So this is something that I always talk about every time I get a chance. It's something that I'm interested in always talking about. And I think I already started it when I was a freshman at Michigan State. Michigan State gave me that opportunity to do it. And I do believe that that's something that I will continue doing. And I think the other next thing that I'm really excited about, the partnerships, I think just going back to the theme of the day, I think every time I think about, okay, there's industry, there's university, we've always seen great relationships between industry and university, but what then, or when do we put in communities? So I think this is something that I'm really excited about, that Michigan State has taken a front line in, where they were trying to put together industry professionals, the university, and communities. Because when you do think about it, if we do add communities into this chain, we're basically just increasing the impact, and it definitely leads to more sustainable solutions. And I think when you just think about it, when people talk about currently, if we have 1.2 billion people that are African, that is supposed to double by 2050. So that basically means that 1 in every 4 will be African. And I think it's important for us to start thinking about, it's going to be a big market. And as universities, it's always important to engage with that community. But at the same time, industry needs to also get together with that community, because that also makes their product better, because they understand who exactly would be their market. So that's something that I am interested in. I know with the connections that we've gotten from MSU, there's something that's possible, because Spartans are basically passionate about such a subject. And I think one of the last things that's also very near and dear to my heart is, people always ask me, okay, yes, you are working on self-driving cars, but are they ever gonna get to Africa, or are they ever gonna get to Zimbabwe? And my answer is always yes, I'm working on self-driving cars, but we need to think about contextualizing that next generation technology. And if we do get to that point, that is definitely going to be important in meeting communities' pressing needs. So I think, for example, I always go back to this, that yes, the cars can drive themselves, but remember, we could also have these autonomous drones that could potentially be used in African communities to deliver medical supplies, to deliver food to remote and war-zone areas. And I think I always go about, people always complaining about the kind of traffic back in Zimbabwe. And I'm like, I think it's true for most developing nations, but we could potentially have the safety features being used or incorporated in our own cars back home that could be used to reduce vehicle fatalities. And I think research has it that it could be reduced by 96%. So for me, it always goes back to the past. MSU experience remains part of me, and I think it was very invaluable. It has definitely shaped my present and what I'm working on and all the different activities that I'm engaged in. But I think most importantly, it has set a path and it set up a pipeline for what the future or what kind of projects I'm going to be engaged in. So once again, I think MSU experience has been amazing, and I was very excited to share my journey. And we could always talk more during the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Panashe. It's always so inspiring to hear your story and just to feel your commitment to young women and your field and addressing the mobility challenges in the continent. It's just terrific. We're so proud of you. Congratulations on your recent graduation. Now we can move to our last speaker, and that is Angela Manjichi, who is from Mozambique and talking to us from the perspective of a current student. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to the African Studies Centers to put together this opportunity to share our experience and our views. So in Mozambique, I work in agriculture sector, and throughout the years, I've worked a lot on MSU leads project in agriculture. So when you go, if you look at the policies in agriculture, there is always an input of MSU. So coming from to MSU was not, okay, it was decided back then, I say I have to go to the university that is doing the most work and relevant work in Mozambique. So that's why I decided to come to MSU, and I'm doing my PhD in community sustainability, looking at agricultural livelihoods and how can we change or improve the livelihoods in our rural communities. So I think coming here, there are several things that are shaping the way I see the relationship between MSU and African countries. And I think the first one is the extent in which we share some of the development challenge. And before coming to us, MSU, I thought United States is great, so I will not see some of these problems. But when I saw them and the way the people on United States address these problems, it started to change the way I see how, as person, as a community, we can do something good for our communities back in Africa. So the first thing, I arrived, I think 2 weeks before the starting of the classes, and the campus was completely empty. And I said, where are those people that I see in the movies? I was expecting something like New York, LA, but it was completely empty. And I will catch the bus, like a random bus every day, just to try to know more places. And I was surprised the way where still in the same county, you see difference between the cities. When you move from East Lansing and you go to downtown Lansing, when you go to South Lansing, you see a completely different scenario. And I say, how come you're still in the same city? And I see all this difference, this social difference. And I was saying, wow, this seems quite a bit like my country. The second aspect is I love food. I work in food systems, and I always try to understand a bit better about local food systems. And I will walk around the campus and walk around Grand River Avenue looking for local restaurants. And they will always come up with McDonald's, with Subway, and they say, where are the local restaurants? And that's when I learned about food desert in the United States, and how food access varies across communities, and how it's also important to America. While in Mozambique, you have a different context of food access, food system, people in America also face the same challenge in terms of food access, in terms of nutrition values. And I start to be more interested to understand why we have all these structural difference in the access to food in the local food system. The third thing, when the classes started and I would walk to my classes, I was so surprised to see the amount of female students on campus. And I said, wow, this is different. I am a mother of a young girl, and I'm interested in gender issues, gender equity, women access to better opportunities. And I thought, how come we have such a lot of female students on campus? What makes it different? And I will go to my class. In my department, we are more female students than male students. And I say, wow, this is the first time where I feel empowered. I really feel that as a woman, I can have access to education. And the fourth thing, I will walk across the campus and I'll see everyone with a shirt, something that will link them to MSU. And sometimes I'll say, what is wrong with those people? They all have white and green shirts, MSU Spartan shirts. Why they have to dress similarly? But later, and of course, I run away to buy something green, so I could also go outside and identify, and people will know, oh, she's a Spartan. But I really was captivated by the sense of identity people have, sense of community, and how they are proudly like to identify themselves with a community. And I start to internalize all this, and what I've learned is here is all about community. All kinds of solutions to our problems come from inside the community. So your identity, your community, your feeling of belonging, it's very important. And I start to also understand that no matter if you are in United States or Africa or Europe, we share the same development issues. For me, it's most important food systems and access to food, availability of food. And I could start to see that we have all this difference, we have all this challenge, but the way we approach our problem is different and varies across the countries. And here in the United States, I really was surprised with how communities are very strong in first identify their problem and then working with the policymakers, research institutions together to come up with a solution to the problem. And is something that I'm still learning, and I want to be able to go back to Mozambique and start working with the community, because I feel that most of the time we have a kind of a top-down approach in the way we perceive community problem, and the level of community engagement is still not strong as it is here in the United States. So I was really surprised, and this is something the things that I want to take back to Mozambique. So in the second aspect is in terms of community engagement, stakeholder engagement, how we address these problems. And previous someone mentioned the role of industry in universities and communities. And it's something that I think we need to capture and strengthen more in our relationship. So I told you that MSU has done a lot of research, has done a lot of development work in agriculture sector in Mozambique, but sometimes I feel that we did a very good work, but we need to do something more to make this work more visible and to bring our communities at the top and not just the recipients of development. So this is something that I think our discussion is, how can we work better? How can we strengthen our actions? How can we make it more sustainable? And I think this is, how can we link this community and research groups, how can we make more valuable? And the first thing when I look at the ethical relationship that you mentioned here is we need to build this kind of trust relationship. I see here a lot, my department work a lot in development issues, so they're involved in the Flint problem, and I see how research really work with the communities, but not in terms of a top-down approach, but try to understand what are the communities' needs and how we as a development or agents, we can help them to raise up and not have this kind of a very patriarchal, paternalist approach. The second aspect is how can we share the power, share or balance the power across communities, research, and industry. And takes me to the second point, that is not only about sharing the power, but also in terms of finding our own development models. So what I've seen is that most of the time we try to look for the best practice, but some of the best practice may work elsewhere, but they don't work in our specific communities. So with all this experience that I've gained here in MSU is that each location, each community will have its own structure. So we cannot copy a model that works in South Africa and try to copy that to Mozambique, but we can see what makes that model work in South Africa and try to address better the situation in Mozambique. So my experience here is, I think among everything is the aspect of identity and community engagement. The second one is the need to build relationships among us with the community, but strong relationship and a relationship where there is a power balance between each entity. And finally is how can we bring back, raise up all the voices that are silent? Like I work with a lot with female farmers in Mozambique. I told I have a daughter, and I want to make sure that the world my daughter will grow up is very different from the world I grew up, and I have a role on that. And as an MSU student, I have mentoring a lot of undergrad students, and I feel that while universities at MSU are very good in transfer like technical skills, some skills are still missing in terms of soft skills, in terms of leadership skills that are very, very important. And I think my dream about African Studies Center is that in the future they can develop a kind of, I don't know if I say induction program, where we can learn everything about our field in our department, but we need to build up either a small program that teach people to be agents of change, to really make impact in their community. So aspects as leadership, network, and community engagement skills should also bring up while they're in MSU. So these are some of the things that I've learned, and this is some of the things I expect to do in the future. And this is some of the things that I think MSU could also help more, not only to develop very good professionals, but also to support the development of very good activists, very good community engagers, and very good people that are making impact in their communities, either at a political level, a bigger level, or a small level as a community level. So these are some of the things I think we should discuss and think about, and how as alumni in our country can also engage more with mentoring young professional, mentoring those kids that are still in secondary school, that they need a model, they need to believe that they can do something impactful with their life in other people's life. And with that, I end my small presentation.
Thank you so much, Angela. Such an inspiring story. And very exciting to get your recommendations for what we can do in the African Studies Center. I love the idea of really building up support for becoming agents of change. All of our panelists today are agents of change, and that's part of the center. We're all so proud and so grateful to have you with us. Could I ask all the panelists to switch on your video? I think it's good if you'll stay muted except for when we're answering questions. I have a couple of questions, and we just have about 5 minutes for questions. So unfortunately, there's not as much time as we would have liked, but let's go. There's one question here from one of our other alumni and active partnership representatives, Jose Jackson Milete, saying, thank you to all the panelists for your great Spartan stories. Maybe you represent about 3 or 4 generations of past and current Spartans. You are a testament to the great education from MSU. How can you use the lessons from this positive Spartan identity to change the narrative about Africa? So I think here asking not just the impact on the ground, but the image of Africa or the narrative about Africa. So that's a great question. If some of you would like to answer that, just take a minute or two, that would be lovely.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very interesting question, and I think it goes back to remember when I was a freshman, and the professor's first question was, what do you think of when you hear Africa? And a lot of students raised their hands, and I think what we heard was, I think of poverty, I think of war, I think of malnutrition, I think of instability. I was sitting in the front row and I raised my hand and I said, I think of home. And I remember a lot of people in awe that, well, this is what we're thinking. How can somebody say they think of home? But for me, it is very important that the only way we could change the narrative is we need to start small. In our workplaces, in our classrooms, in our engagements, let's talk a little bit about where we come from. And I think people will be very interested. Let's show them what we have. And I think already being Spartans, we already have a footprint. So I think it's time we start talking about that MSU footprint together with where we're coming from. And I think it's those small conversations that could potentially lead up to a bigger spread of what exactly is the African narrative and what should be the worldview and what exactly it is like.
Thank you, Panashe.
I'll jump in. I think, again, that's a great question. And for my experience, where I have been both a professional and have moved into entrepreneurship, the reason, for example, that we're moving into social entrepreneurship is really about that. Like Tinashe has just mentioned, the common narrative about Africa is, that we lag behind in development, that nothing good or nothing trailblazing can come out of the continent. And we're determined to change that narrative. And one of the things we learned, or I learned at least when I was a student, was, the only person holding me back would be myself, with what I would think about, what I dream about, what I was comfortable about aiming for. So if enough of the alumni and the current generation get onto a path that shows the others coming behind us that we really have a great future in the continent and that our time is now, we can change the narrative. We can get into leadership, we can get into research, we can get into activism, we can change the narrative for the positive, especially because we have been socialized and we have been exposed to a side of the world, or a view of the world that lets us know that it is possible. So it's a great thing that if we share our experiences and push our Spartan brand and our ideas about what the future of Africa can be, I hope that in our lifetimes that the Africa that we've always wanted will be a reality. So that's my thought on that.
Can I come in there? I won't be long, except to say that exchange programs, as I've witnessed them every 2 years of students coming from MSU, and I've hosted some of them when John Mesler and the group came. That in itself, I think that direct experience, people to people relationship is one way of demystifying the African experience. The second one is for African studies programs to revisit the scholarship content so that it is not a pan-European exercise with every other scholarship being an attachment, but rather it allows for epistemic justice and plurality of voices, wherein African contribution to civilization, to human development is raised, not just for the sake of history, but for what it is even in the contributions today, wherein the relationship between the North and the South, where some countries train their doctors and they come, their engineers, and work in the North, and they have made that contribution. But also some of the global trends which show Africa, albeit from a low base, is beginning to put its house in order. It's not going to be an easy way, but right now we are in a space of equal opportunity embarrassment because every part of the world is experiencing its own problems. So the time to sit back and laugh at that corner or that corner, I think, is beginning to show that it's a futile exercise. So to me, I think it would be multiple exercises, including these kinds of exchanges of views. Thank you.
I'm afraid that we're coming to the end of our time. We had such a short amount of time, and I think that question was a really good one. We have another question about Black Lives Matter, and I think we might I might ask you if you could have a private connection with the person who asked that question after the webinar, because we are coming to the end of our time, and we have one more person who's going to be speaking now is Damaris Choti. Damaris is the assistant to the director of the African Studies Center, MSU Alumni and Friends Network that we're developing. So let me hand it over now to you, Damaris.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you so much to all our panelists. This has been wonderful, and I know that all our participants, all of you have been listening to us, will agree with me that this has been really inspirational. So we don't have that much time, but I really want to say that this has been uplifting to hear about your personal experiences, the stories that you've shared during your time at MSU. I had Somadoda talk about how he got his confidence, skills, and different types of opportunities at MSU, and how this has helped him explore and venture into different opportunities outside MSU. And David about the partnerships, learning about partnerships, social interactions, and how to become a global Spartan, and how actually this led you into starting a company with your colleague from here at MSU. And also Panashe, work ethics, also learning about work ethics, how MSU prepares people for industry, good things that you're hearing about MSU out there. And also Angela telling us about drawing comparisons on your observations because you're now a student between US and Africa, which shows that we're so interconnected, and regardless of our existence in different spaces, we're very interconnected. This is really very inspiring, and it's not only about your experiences, but what I really, what was really a highlight for me is how these experiences have impacted your journeys. All of you are thinking about how to impact local communities, and I know MSU is a land grant institution. One of our core missions is to impact communities around us, and this is what you've been able to do using your experiences from MSU. This is really very inspirational. And a question that, not a question, actually a comment that Somadoda put forward about having data of alumni and using this data to forge networks. I'll be pleased to share that that's one of our initiatives here at MSU. The African Studies Center, for the past 3 years, I should mention, has been working on engaging our alumni actively. And I lead these initiatives, and one of the things that we're trying to do is to help facilitate the formation of alumni clubs in different parts of Africa. And this is the starting point for having the connections that Somadoda mentioned about. So far we have an alumni club in Kenya, we have another one in Botswana, and another one in Ghana. And it's a work in progress. We need to have many more in different parts. Somadoda in South Africa, we need one. Panashe in Zimbabwe, we need one. And I've been working with Angela because we're here together currently. And these are things that are very doable. And what these connections are going to help us do is to start those mentorship relationships with our younger alumni that I've heard you talk about, because we've been saying, then what do we need to do? This is where we're going to start. And another important initiative that I really want to mention about is and it was recently launched, is the MSU African Alumni MSU African Alumni and Friends Network. This is very recent, and while we have this initially, we want to have it as a platform for internal collaboration with our MSU units. We realize that we are not the only ones at the African Studies Center that are going to engage our alumni. We have our alumni of different kinds, degreed alumni, visitors to MSU, and working with our own colleagues here at MSU before we expand it to other friends outside will be very important. So I really want to thank you again so much for all the inspiring stories that you've given, and we look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damaris, and thank you to all of our panelists. This has been a wonderful starting point. It's just the starting point, I think, for what I hope will be many future alumni conversations, and just especially thank you for your connections, that you really link us. You are the partners that are at the core of our relationships in Africa. If I could ask some of the other people now, I want to say thank you to some of those who made this possible. If Amy Carnahan, if you could please turn on your video if you can. Just want to thank you for all your hard work at Alumni University and for letting the African Studies Center and our alumni be a part of this important event. Devonte Kennedy is the mastermind and wizard behind the whole thing on the tech side. Devonte, if you reveal your video, we'd love to thank you and see you. You're just so awesome. Lisa Frege, same thing. Lisa is our superstar of tech in the African Studies Center, does a lot of our virtual events. I think many of you, if you're African alumni, you know Lisa. She's our welcome committee. She keeps us all connected. We wouldn't have partnerships if it weren't for Lisa. And lastly, I want to give special thanks to Marie Aida Diokwar, who's in Dakar, Senegal. She's one of our translators today. And Mohamed Benghazi, also currently in Dakar. French-English translation simultaneous. Thank you all so much. And we have a captioner.
Nous avons, voilà, quelqu'un que je n'ai pas présenté. Nous avons
challenges. So thank you to everyone who participated. If you could all turn on your video for 1 minute and give us a big smile. Daniel wants to take your picture. So please turn on and smile. Amy and Devonte, you can do it too. You're part of us. We're a team. and wish that all the audience members were here to get their images too. But this has been a wonderful event, and we can't do it without the support of everyone. We hope we'll see you next year at Alumni University. If you're in the US and you're an MSU Spartan alum, you're welcome to join one of our programs to travel to Africa, meet Soma over there on the continent with one of our faculty who take those trips. Currently, Isaac Kalimbu is leading. And we hope you'll stay in touch with us at the African Studies Center. So take good care, everyone, and thank you all so much for your participation and for joining us today. Go green!
Go green!
Go white.
Go white. Yeah.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
You too. All right.
Thank you.